In the last winter of the war in Europe, when the roads of Germany were broken, the fields were wet, and every village could hide an anti-tank gun, British gunners brought forward one of the strangest armoured vehicles ever to serve under the British flag. At first glance, it looked almost wrong. It was low, boxy, open at the top, and built on the chassis of the old Valentine infantry tank. It did not have the grand, aggressive appearance of a Tiger. It did not have the clean confidence of a Sherman Firefly. It did not even look as if it was facing the correct direction, because the gun pointed backwards. To anyone seeing it for the first time, the British Archer looked like a mistake from a factory floor. A tank destroyer that seemed to have been assembled the wrong way round. A vehicle that drove one way but fought the other. And yet that strange decision was not madness. It was British practicality under pressure. By the time the Archer reached the battlefield, German armoured crews had already learned to respect British anti-tank fire. They knew the danger of the 17-pounder gun. They knew that in the right hands, at the right range, it could turn a proud German machine into a burning wreck. But the Archer added something else. It did not only bring a powerful gun, it brought a trick of survival. It could wait in cover, fire, and then drive away without turning round. That was the secret. Not glamorous, not speed, not thick armour. A cold, clever answer to a brutal battlefield. Before the story continues, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It helps keep these serious British history stories alive, especially the stories of the men, machines, and decisions that are too often forgotten. To understand why Britain built a weapon that fired backwards, it is necessary to go back to the problem that haunted British armoured warfare during the middle years of the Second World War. The German army was not a careless enemy. Its armoured forces had learned in Poland, France, North Africa, and Russia. German crews knew how to use ground, range, cover, and fear. Their tanks were not invincible, but by 1943 and 1944, vehicles such as the Panther represented a grave danger. The Panther combined powerful armour, mobility, and a long, high-velocity gun. A British or Canadian crew facing one in open country did not have the luxury of treating it like an ordinary target. Against such machines, courage alone was not enough. The British Army needed firepower. The answer was the Ordnance quick-firing 17-pounder, a gun that became one of the most important British anti-tank weapons of the war. It was not small, it was not easy to move, it was not convenient. But it could do what the battlefield demanded. It could punch through armour that older British guns struggled to defeat. The 17-pounder appeared in towed anti-tank units. It was fitted into the Sherman Firefly, creating one of the most feared Allied tanks in northwest Europe. It appeared in the Challenger cruiser tank and the Achilles tank destroyer. But Britain still needed more mobile anti-tank firepower. There was a practical problem. The gun was large, heavy, and awkward. Not every tank chassis could carry it. A new design would take time, and time was one thing Britain did not have in endless supply. So the engineers looked at what already existed: the Valentine. By the later stages of the war, the Valentine infantry tank was no longer a front-line battle tank in the same way it had once been. It was reliable, relatively low, and available. It had served Britain and Commonwealth forces across harsh theatres. It was not glamorous, but it had the quality that mattered to British engineers in wartime. It worked. The idea was simple in theory and difficult in practice. Take the Valentine chassis and mount the 17-pounder on it. But the Valentine was small. There was no easy way to fit a large turret with that gun. The space was too limited, the weight and balance were too difficult. A conventional, forward-facing gun would create problems with the shape, length, and weight of the vehicle. So Vickers Armstrongs produced a solution that looked absurd until one understood the battlefield. The gun would face the rear. The vehicle would drive forward, but its main weapon would point backwards over the engine deck, inside an open-topped fighting compartment. The official name was the self-propelled 17-pounder, Valentine Mark I Archer. The nickname was perfect. An archer does not survive by standing in the open and shouting. An archer waits. He chooses ground. He fires from where the enemy does not expect him. Then he moves. That was the logic of the British archer. It was not designed to charge like a cavalry tank. It was not designed to duel heavy armor in the open like a knight on a battlefield. It was a self-propelled anti-tank gun, operated within the British artillery tradition. Its job was to be placed where enemy armor might pass, to strike hard, and to leave before the answer came back. The open top made it vulnerable to shell bursts, mortars, snipers, and bad weather. The armor was not heavy enough to invite a direct contest. The gun traverse was limited. The crew worked in cramped conditions. The driver sat in a strange position relative to the weapon. The archer was not perfect, and no serious history should pretend it was. But war is not won only by perfect machines. Often it is won by machines that solve one terrible problem well enough. And the Archer solved a terrible problem. It gave British and Commonwealth gunners a powerful anti-tank gun that could move under its own power, hide low to the ground, and escape quickly after firing. That last part mattered. A towed 17-pounder could be deadly, but once it fired, it gave away its position. Moving it again under fire was difficult and dangerous. Men had to manhandle equipment, attach it to a vehicle, and withdraw while shells or machine gun fire searched for them. In a battlefield of fast-moving armor and sudden counterfire, that delay could kill. The Archer changed the rhythm. Its rear-facing gun meant that if the crew had positioned the vehicle correctly, the driver could already be facing the route of escape. After the shot, he did not need to swing the whole vehicle around while the enemy recovered from shock. The Archer could pull away, fire, reverse the logic of the fight, disappear. That is why the machine that looked wrong could be so dangerous. The German crew facing it might see nothing at first, perhaps only a hedge, a broken wall, a dark line at the edge of a village. The Archer's low shape helped it vanish into the kind of European terrain where the last months of the war were fought. Muddy lanes, orchards, railway crossings, farm buildings, flooded streets, and shattered towns. Then the guns spoke. The 17-pounder did not need to look impressive in order to be respected. Its reputation came from what it could do. In the hands of trained gunners, against the side of a Panther, a self-propelled gun, or a vehicle moving across exposed ground, it could be devastating. The Archer's crews were not movie heroes. They were soldiers doing a hard technical job under the pressure of fear. They had to judge distance, read ground, keep discipline, and resist the temptation to fire too early. A wasted shot could reveal the position. A moment of panic could destroy the ambush. A badly chosen escape route could trap the crew in the same place they had hoped to leave. This was not simple bravery, it was controlled nerve. The British Army had long understood the value of discipline in anti-tank warfare. A gun crew did not win by rage, it won by stillness, by waiting until the target came into the killing ground, by accepting that the enemy might be closer than any man liked, by doing the work properly when every instinct urged movement. The Archer fitted that character. It was quiet strength made mechanical. We've reached halfway. So, if you are enjoying this story of British wartime invention, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment below. Would you have trusted a vehicle whose gun pointed backwards? By the autumn of 1944, the Archer was entering service. The war in Western Europe had changed since D-Day. The Allies had broken out of Normandy and advanced across France and Belgium, but victory was not yet guaranteed. The German army was retreating, but retreating armies can still be lethal. They defend rivers, towns, road junctions, woods, and bridges. They leave mines. They hide anti-tank guns. They use every delay to make the next mile expensive. In that world, British anti-tank units needed mobility. The Archer arrived late, but not too late to matter. Archers served in northwest Europe, and examples are recorded with British artillery units in Germany in the final months of the war. They also appeared in Italy, where mountainous terrain, narrow roads, and difficult lines of sight made anti-tank warfare a test of patience as much as firepower. Italy was not an easy theatre for armour. The country punished vehicles. Roads curved through hills and villages. Mud and stone could slow any advance. A tank did not always have room to maneuver, and an anti-tank gun that could move itself was a valuable thing. Northwest Europe was different, but no less dangerous. By early 1935, the fighting moved through the Netherlands and into Germany. Flooded areas, railway lines, villages, and defensive positions shaped the battlefield. The enemy was wounded, but still armed. German armour was less plentiful than it had been, yet individual German vehicles remained deadly when handled well. This is where the Archer's strange design began to make sense in human terms. Imagine the crew, the commander scanning the ground, the gunner waiting for a target, the loader with the heavy ammunition close at hand, the driver knowing that escape depended on his position before the first shot was even fired. There is something brutally honest about that arrangement. The Archer did not promise safety, it offered a chance. It said that if the crew chose the ground well, if they stayed calm, if the shot was good, they might live long enough to move before the enemy answered. That was the bargain. British courage in the Second World War was often like that. Not clean, not theatrical, not surrounded by speeches. Just men accepting a dangerous bargain because the work had to be done. There is a temptation to laugh at the Archer because it looked odd. Many unusual wartime vehicles deserve some laughter. War produces desperate machines, rushed machines, ugly machines, and compromises built because no perfect answer exists. But the Archer should not be dismissed as a joke. It was a compromise, yes, but it was an intelligent compromise. It used an existing chassis. It carried a gun of genuine power. It had a low silhouette. It suited ambush. It gave anti-tank units mobility. It did not ask to be something it was not. That final point is important. The Archer was not a heavy tank pretending to dominate the battlefield. It was not an all-purpose armored hero. It was a specialist. It had one purpose: to bring the 17-pounder into position and make enemy armor pay for advancing carelessly. The Germans had their own specialized weapons. They understood tank destroyers, assault guns, anti-tank screens, and concealed fire. They were not naive. That makes the Archer more interesting, not less. It was not tricking fools. It was entering a battlefield full of experienced men and trying to survive by being clever. In war, cleverness can be as valuable as armor. British engineering during the Second World War often had this quality. It was not always beautiful. It was not always smooth. Sometimes it was improvised under pressure, criticized by crews, altered in service, and remembered only by specialists. But beneath the rough edges was a national habit. Solve the problem, use what is available, and keep fighting. The Archer belongs to that tradition. It was born from shortage, urgency, and experience. Britain had learned that German armor could not be wished away. The answer had to be steel, powder, optics, training, and nerve. The Archer combined all of that in one strange profile. When it fired, it brought the authority of the 17-pounder. When it moved, it showed why the backwards gun was not stupidity. And when it sat hidden, low and patient, it represented something more British than it first appeared: restraint. The refusal to waste strength before the right moment. The willingness to look unimpressive until the instant action was required. That is why the story works so well. The Archer did not look terrifying. It looked awkward. Yet on the battlefield, awkward things can kill if they are placed correctly. For a German crew advancing through uncertain ground, the danger was not always the large weapon in plain sight. Sometimes the danger was the shape that had not been noticed. The small silhouette beside a hedge. The vehicle whose gun was already waiting. The flash from a position that seemed empty a second before. And then, before return fire could properly settle, the Archer was moving away. Not because the crew were running, because the design had been built for that moment. Some weapons reveal the personality of the army that made them. The Archer reveals a particular kind of British wartime mind. Practical, unsentimental, sometimes eccentric, and deeply serious about survival. It did not need to look correct. It needed to work. The men who served with such machines deserve more than a footnote. They were part of the wider British and Commonwealth war effort that pushed through the last hard months of Europe. Their work was technical, dangerous, and rarely celebrated. Anti-tank crews did not always get the glory of infantry assaults or armoured charges. Their victories could be sudden and silent. A road held, a counterattack stopped, a village flank secured, a column protected from a threat that most men never saw. That is the hidden labour of war. Not every decisive moment becomes a legend. Sometimes it is simply a gun crew waiting in the cold. The Archer also reminds us that British victory was not built from one kind of strength. It was built from sailors keeping sea lanes open, pilots fighting in the air, infantrymen enduring the close fight, engineers bridging rivers, factory workers producing weapons, codebreakers reading patterns in the dark, and artillerymen learning how to make machines like the Archer useful. The war was not won by perfection. It was won by endurance, adaptation, and the stubborn refusal to stop improving. By the time Germany surrendered in 1945, the Archer had not become the most famous British armoured vehicle of the war. It never replaced the Sherman Firefly in public memory. It never became an icon like the Churchill tank or the Spitfire. It remained what it had always been, a specialist machine for a specialist task. But that is exactly why it matters. History is not only made by famous machines, it is also made by the strange ones. The ones built because somebody looked at a problem and refused to accept that there was no answer. The Archer was a British answer to a hard question. How do you put a very powerful anti-tank gun on a small available chassis and still give the crew a chance to escape? The answer looked backwards, but on the battlefield it made sense. And for any enemy crew that discovered that too late, the lesson came in the most unforgiving language of war. A flash, a strike, a vehicle already leaving. Britain's strength was not always loud. Sometimes it was a warship in bad weather, an aircraft climbing into cloud, a soldier holding a line, or a gun crew hidden behind a hedge with the patience to wait until fear and discipline met in the same breath. The Archer was not beautiful. It was not perfect. But it was British in one of the most important ways. It turned a limitation into a weapon. If you watched until the end, write the word Archer in the comments and tell us this: was the backwards gun a strange mistake or one of Britain's cleverest battlefield compromises?